Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Josh, your friend, I took a breath this morning, I drank some water, and also Cyberpunk 2077 continues to not be in the state that we thought it might be at the end of last year. Now, the latest thing seems to be that it might not even make its slot for the one-year anniversary, the next-gen type stuff that was scheduled for the end of this year.
Yes, tragically, Scott, CD Projekt Red as a whole just continues to not have a very good year. They recently just did their financial conference call with investors, and they updated investors on two games, the next-gen version of Cyberpunk and the next-gen version of The Witcher 3, which you might have forgotten was actually announced last year for release this year. So both these projects were set to come out at the end of this year, and apparently CD Projekt Red is still targeting 2021 release dates for both of these projects. However, that came with a big caveat, because for Cyber specifically, if there's going to be a delay, they said, quote, they're keeping in mind the lessons we have learned during the past year and taking into account that this project still remains in development. We can't say with full certainty that the production schedule will not change. So they've been like a little bit wishy-washy about whether or not it's actually going to drop. It sounds like they have all the intentions in the world of getting it out, but like they said, you know, with how Cyberpunk initially came out at the end of last year, they don't want to repeat those mistakes. They want to make sure that the next-gen versions are at least right. And they have still 150 people, employees, they confirmed, that are working on Cyberpunk full-time, you know, fixing bugs, making these next-gen versions. So it's still slated for this year, but it's September now, and they're already laying the groundwork of why it might be pushed. And look, I want to clarify, on the surface, I think that's completely fine. You know, so many games this year have been pushed. You know, it's just the reality of the year we've been living in. It's just that this comes on top of everything that CDPR has been through this year, and I feel like for fans, it's just kind of going to be viewed as another thing they've missed. You know, like the patches weren't as substantial as I think some people were hoping. You know, it took a while to get the messaging out. Obviously, they had the big hack, which didn't help, and I feel like all of this stuff is just continuing to snowball, and there's no real good news on the horizon for this game, really, it seems. Obviously, the patches have improved things, but it's not come back in a big way like I think CDPR wanted it to after it went tits up last year.
Areolas to the sky. I think that, I mean, as much as they put that roadmap out where it was like really vague anyway, it was really barren as to what they were actually going to be doing. The reality is that like a lot of the patches, especially the most recent one, did seem to quite meaningfully tighten up what is there. But at the same time, you know, I just, every now and then I'll just Google Cyberpunk 2077, just see what's going on with it. And there was another glitch compilation doing the rounds, just seeing if some of the most long-standing bugs and glitches are still in there, and some of them are. But I think for the casual player who isn't necessarily looking to break the game in specific ways, Cyberpunk is a nicely enjoyable game for the vast majority now. It's just nowhere near what like we thought it was going to be. I still think that it is a enjoyable enough title. The wider conversation, and one of the reasons that I wanted to like do this video, is like, what the hell do you think they're going to do for the next gen release? Like, I don't think it'll just be as simple as doing a 4K 60 upgrade. I don't think it'll just be as simple as targeting the what was the PC release. I wonder how much they are rolling in all the extra content, because they've done one extra content pack, which was 2 new skins for Johnny Silverhand, and I forget what else it was. It was really minuscule stuff, even though they're nice enough skins. It wasn't really anything. But I wonder, because people already data mined the PC version and found extra content files, looked like single player type stuff, or at least meaningful expansions to the story, kind of like what they did with Witcher 3. And I wonder how much that is what the next gen, almost like a second release version of Cyberpunk will be, where it's sort of like, this is what we actually meant to give you, and the life paths are more fleshed out and all that kind of stuff. But it's just such a balancing act, because for as much as if you pick Street Kid, that seems to be the way the story was actually written. If you go down the Corpo route or the Nomad route, Nomad's a bit more fleshed out, but Corpo is like 5 minutes, and then you just get back to the main game. I wonder how much they've gone back to that stuff and gone, okay, we actually need to flesh all this out, and they've just needed that much more time in the oven to ostensibly re-release the game.
I mean, it's funny you mentioned Corpo, because that's what I played as, even though it went against all my instincts, and you're exactly right. You know, I feel like that had no impact on the game at all. Like, the opening was kind of cool, but I was really disappointed with the dialogue options that you got throughout the game and the specific life path mission that you get later on. And I think you're completely right. I feel like when it comes to these next-gen versions, the fact that you have all of these developers working on it, I feel like it is going to come out bundled in with new content, or at least feel or be marketed as almost a new game. Because I think the big, clarification and caveat that comes with all of the patches and stuff is that they mostly work, or at least they work the best already on next-gen consoles. Like, Cyberpunk you can play now if you've got a PS5 and you've got an Xbox Series X or S, and it'll play relatively fine. However, even when Sony put it back on the store, they had to clarify that if you're playing on the PlayStation 4, though, that's when you're still going to run into trouble. It feels like they're almost, beyond salvaging at this moment in time, and that sucks, obviously, for the people who own those consoles and are looking forward to it. And I feel like the stability, or the relative stability of Cyberpunk on next-gen machines already means that they can't just come out with kind of like better graphics or maybe a more stable frame rate or a higher frame rate. I feel like there needs to be something more, because already there is a difference between the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 4 version, for instance, even if that's like the lesser of two evils and not the difference between a glamorous version and a pretty good version. So I feel like, they've got all of this DLC that they announced before the game even came out. We have barely seen any of it. Like you said, we've only seen a slight sliver of it. Obviously, they've been working on other things, but the fact that they have so many developers continuing to work on it makes me think, at least, that when this next-gen version comes out, it will hopefully make a splash and will hopefully be a big move in kind of righting the ship. And I think that's kind of what I'm reading into these comments that were said at the financial report as well, with them saying, look, we're keeping in mind the mistakes we've made, and we're not going to do that again just to hit a milestone. We're not going to hit in 2021 just to say that we hit in 2021 if it's not going to be good enough, if it's not going to be substantial enough. And ultimately, I think that is the right move, even if it will cause some potential worry in the short term with videos like this, obviously, because we're looking at it like, oh, it's another thing.
Well, I think my side of it is just like, I want it to be good. The thing that I'm fascinated by with Cyberpunk is like, what is the through-line vision for that game? I know that if you go out and read all the stuff that Jason Schreier put together, all the various behind-the-scenes reports that came out, it changed so much over the years. Like the original 3 lead story designers or writers or whatever they were, the original conceptual people for that team departed CDPR a few years into the project, and then we had the whole thing with Adam Badowski taking over and target GTA 5 and chase the GTA money, and that was what kind of came out in the marketing, was this sort of cyberpunk adjacent GTA type thing where it was, taking over Night City's not going to be easy and all that kind of thing, and like all these different condos that you can buy, and none of that was in the game, and that obviously isn't the tone of the game itself. But it's also weird because there's a version of Cyberpunk that exists in the minds of people, and it's the one that they advertise too. It's obviously the one that they got out there in the first place. But I just wonder, like, when is it done? Like, so everyone keeps comparing it to No Man's Sky, and that game, is a procedurally generated universe with, like, literally you can plug things into that game, and you can literally see, the foundation. Like, the foundation was always there. It was rickety, but it was always there. The idea of a procedurally generated universe, and you just plug content into it for as long as you like. And do all these different things. And I love No Man's Sky so much. And like, you compare that to Cyberpunk, and the foundations, the literal mission goal of what they set out to make is barely there. Like, it's not, like, I like absolutely love it too. I have over 100 hours in it, but it's like, it is at the absolute core of it. Is it just this story of one guy who becomes, a cyberpunk, and he becomes friends with Johnny Silverhand, who lives in his head, and that is the story, and they need to completely divorce the fact that they advertised it as an open RPG with this infinite choice thing, because it just isn't that? Or do they try and skew back towards that, because that was what it was for a few years before they got Keanu Reeves in? That was the thing that completely changed everything, according to all the behind-the-scenes stuff. So I kind of just wonder, if you're that team working on it, which is also one of the biggest things that came out of the Schreier report, was that the team themselves didn't know what they were aiming for anymore. What do you draw a line under and just say, this is the game, we're going to fix it to hit this, and then we're going to move on? Or do they just keep trying to hit the version that they sort of like nebulously put out there for the last literal decade?
Honestly, man, if I knew that, I think I'd be a millionaire. If I could solve that problem, solve the problem of Cyberpunk, I feel like, I'd be sleeping on a bed of money. And I feel like when it comes to what they decide to do next, I feel like we're going to see that in whatever the first big expansion pack is. For me, whatever comes first in like the big major DLC and the major follow-up, that's going to dictate the tone of what they want Cyberpunk to be following that. Whether it is going to be this kind of more hardcore RPG, like you said, or whether it's going to be something more anarchic, something more freeform, like a GTA, where they can continue to plug things into it. But I do agree that even though I have a weird fondness for the game, man, like not to continue, not to just
fun with it.
Indulge this, but when it came out, even though there was so much I hated about it, so much that just completely frustrated me with it crashing every 30 minutes. There was something there because I still think about it quite often, you know. I still think about having a fond time with it in spite of all of its flaws. And I feel like if they can just polish that diamond off, if they can just, you know, make that bigger, focus in on what people actually resonated with at launch, people like me and you who gave it a chance, you know, and then kind of sell that to everyone else, they might be able to do a No Man's Sky sort of turned around, but it's going to take a lot of work, and hopefully these next-gen versions are kind of like the start of that. I do want to quickly mention The Witcher 3, which I talked about. That's not actually being made by CD Projekt Red. That's been outsourced to Saber Interactive, who did the port for the Witcher 3 Switch version, and they were kind of like saying the same things with that. They said that they're aiming for 2021 like they promised, but at the same time it might get pushed. And Saber Interactive, they have had their own issues. You know, they had an Evil Dead game that was supposed to come out this month, I think, and that was pushed to 2022. So obviously they've already internally pushed games. It would make sense if they had to push this as well. But yeah, I think most of this is the reality of the year we're in. It just looks worse for CD Projekt Red, who has kind of struggled to live up to their promises of turning things around in this year. Obviously, it's not going to be as quickly snapped together as a lot of us hoped it would be, but hopefully Scott Salford, it still makes for a good game in the long run. Whether or not you're going to be around for that long run in terms of interest is an entirely different question though.
Well, that's the thing doing the rounds at the minute was that I saw YouTuber Spawnwave say that it's a hit in the bargain bins at his local GameStop or whatever. So it's like it isn't doing the numbers. But if at the time when they put it back on the PlayStation Store, it was back in the top trending searches. So people are still curious about it. I mean, it's a talking point at the very least. And I think a lot of people are just curious what the hell Cyberpunk is if you didn't jump in on that initial wave. And also, like as a general pointer, you might as well pick it up for very cheap right now because you're only going to get wined and dined going forward. They're only going to try and make good on it, and they're not going to charge for anything else. I'd be amazed if they put a price tag on any of the upcoming DLC. I think it'll be the complete opposite. I think you might as well pick it up for cheap now and then just get given a ton of DLC, whether it be single player stuff or just random accessory stuff like new costumes or new shopping systems, cosmetics, whatever it is. I just feel like they have such a lot to claw back. It's another comparison to No Man's Sky because I feel like the love was kind of there from a hardcore. I mean, I was there from the beginning for No Man's Sky, and I always bring No Man's Sky up because everyone compares Cyberpunk to it. But it's like everyone wanted Cyberpunk to succeed. Like it was Sean Murray and literally 12 other people who made that game, and they messed up, and it was cataclysmic at the time. And absolutely an example of hype gone mad, and like, you know, literally dude did a lot of lies. Got his head down though and worked their way out of it. And like I said, there was always a seed of people wanting it to succeed. Like little team goes astray. This is what they've been doing, and I feel like they managed to wrangle that back in. This is so much bigger and on such a weirdly bigger scale. And like, yeah, we can roll in the reality of this, but it's just fascinating. Just going like, how do you right the ship when it's this big? When what was that ship that got stuck in the canal like a few months ago? It just feels like one of them.
But it does sort of feel like that blocking everything that's coming in.
Yeah, and it's just sort of like what counter momentum do you need to put in place? I don't have to imagine it's a combination of just saying, hey, look, here's The Witcher 3 on next gen. It looks gorgeous. Maybe they make The Witcher 3 look like it did in those original renders back in 2014 or beforehand. And they give everything out for free. And yet 2022 is just the year that CDPR get back on the horse, I was going to say. But they've got a bad reputation with horses as well, so I don't know. But hopefully that's the way that it goes. But yeah, let us know what you think down in the comments below. What are you expecting to see from Cyberpunk 2077 1 year on? And is there any way that they can claw anything back after these many mistakes? For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
And we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.